I'm a walking pharmaceutical depository, and as soon as the government gives out do-re-mi, boy, are there eager hands to get at that. The medical profession, holy Christopher, what's the other one? The pharmaceuticals, they're all in there raping us, you know. And I mean, gosh knows for science investigations and to create these marvelous, you know, things that are extending our lives are part and parcel of that business of, come on, just quit moving there. Ensure that these outfits have funds to do that. So you can't complain too much. But then on the other hand, and that's in my book there, we have a Congress that's dead on their feet. And all of those politicians, whether Republican or Democrat, their pockets are lined with corporate monies. And so corporate America has taken over, and they don't give a goddamn, just as long as the investors are making money. And my gosh, I just heard on the radio today, stock market, I think, was down to 16,500. A couple of weeks ago, it was 17,500. A couple of weeks. So this world situation is not getting any better. And I think with that ISIS and all that stuff that's going on in the Middle East, holy Christ, you know, we're just itching for a trigger that's going to wipe out. And this is my prediction. By 2015, 100 to 200 million people are going to be destroyed in continental United States. And that's going to be either by biological warfare or suitcase atomic destruction. These people out there, in fact, if you listen to the Diane Rehm show today and hear some of these predictions that somebody is making of our future, all going into electronics. I mean, can you imagine automobiles now will be all driven automatically? You just get in and push the button and sit back. I mean, what is this idea of taking responsibility off of the mind of the individual to what he's actually doing and can cause? And I mean, it's profound. And I'm a product of the educational system of America. And my whole career has been teaching for 42, 43 years. I've had a total of 7,843 students.
Wow, you keep
from
count.
Kindergarten to college to
Wow.
grad students, yeah. Well, if I sold one of these books to every one of those for $1, I'd be clear. But that's not going to be. And I didn't do these with the idea of making money. I did it because I have over, at least 80, 90 friends like you.
Uh-huh.
And I did it to give them a piece of me to remember me by, you know. So that's what it's all about, you know.
Sure.
And I often hear people, you know, my friends telling me stories about their childhood or experiences they've had. And I said, well, are you writing this down? You know, are you keeping it? Well, yeah, sort of not. I said, well, geez, how about some drawings? That's what I do, you know. Well, I can't draw. And then I said, you can't draw? I said, well, do you make music? Do you give? Oh, I can't make music. I can't. Well, and you're not writing it? Well, I can't. And so you find here's one of the brilliant nations in the world who's produced brilliant scientists and innovators, where the majority of the population says, I can't do it. And the reason they've been so bombarded by media or the papers or the written material that they just feel they can't come up to that. And so if you say you can't draw, their idea of drawing, if they have to draw, it's got to look like a Rembrandt, you know. Well, I don't draw like a Rembrandt. I draw like Bob Borchard. And my prediction is in 2015, the United States is going to be attacked properly or improperly by biological or suitcase atomic, and 1 million and 2 million to 2 and maybe 3 million people are going to be killed.
Well,
We're concerned about this Ebola. You know, we got what, 3 cases in the United States right now, going on 4?
Well, right now, one alive that we know of.
Yeah, yeah.
She's probably the nurse that
Yeah,
didn't
right.
report.
Yeah, yeah. And, yeah, and I don't know what the heck. You know, they trace this Ebola to a river in not Sri Lanka, well, it's one of those East Coast African nations. That's where it originated. Why that river, not other rivers, you know? And then the fact that all of those people over there are subject to that, and how many thousands have died already. And we're over there trying to build shelters and hospitals and beds to take care of the ones that are coming down, you know. And we got a military force of 100+ guys over there trying to build these shelters, keep up with the invasion rate. So it's really something. And, you know, I can't help but think, well, we've had all kinds of people in scientific laboratories all over the world. And if just one decides to put that in some system. And I get more junk mail now. And I realize sometimes I open this mail, I start sneezing. And I thought, well, there must be something in the printer's ink or something, or in the printing process. So when I open this mail, I sneeze. Well, you've heard about letters salted with, one guy tried to scare everybody by putting some kind of powdered stuff in there. It was harmless, but it caused a big uproar.
Well, another one did, and it wasn't harmful.
Oh, no, right, exactly, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I think that I was going to follow through on my business of education, and I think I'd mentioned that I'd had 7,843 students. But when I look back on education in America, and I mentioned this in the book, that we have failed to teach effectively critical thinking and questioning. I would have had no compulsion. I've been frightened as hell to ask any of my teachers to explain something. You didn't want to stand out in class, you know. And it wasn't until I was in 8th grade, and my homeroom teacher, who happened to be the math teacher at the elementary school that I wound up in, Public School 45 in Buffalo, New York. And her name was Mrs. Finkelstein. And she taught math, art class math, as well as their other classes too. And I had a problem with algebra. I couldn't quite understand. I'm not math oriented at all. So I went up to her and I asked her, I said, Mrs. Finkelstein, she says, Borchard, you're just stupid. 29 other kids heard the same thing, you know. If you want to turn off a student, just call them stupid, you know. Well, that's the last time I asked anybody a question until I think it was my freshman or sophomore year, it must have been my freshman year in college, after I came out of the Army. And again, it was, I think, advanced algebra. Is that the next one after algebra, advanced algebra? And I was having difficulty with that. Well, the guy who taught it, and gosh, right now I've forgotten his name. I think I have it, maybe put it in the book. I don't know, in my first book. His first name was Bob, and I can't think of his last name. I taught at Lafayette High School in Buffalo. And he had a club foot. And of course, that was the first time I ever experienced anybody with a physical disability, you know.
Hmm.
So he always walked with a limp, you know. But he was a very thoughtful guy and very warm fellow. So I had the courage to go up and ask him. And he said, "Oh, here, sit down." And he sat down and he went through this whole thing with me, which is what a teacher should do, you know. And that's the first reinforcement I got, you know, from my educational experience. No teacher really cared, you know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was born in 1928, and my sister arrived 3 years after that. So there were just two in my family. But believe it or not, my grandmother, my mother's mother, Fanny Ball Underwood, she was a Ball. And I have a photograph in the back room of her at age 18 sitting with her family and her three sisters celebrating the birthday of her grandfather, who at 16 and 17 held the reins of George Washington's horse. And George Washington visited the Ball family in what is now called Spencerport, New York, which is a suburb of Rochester, New York, to be. It didn't exist at that time, as far as I know. So, Martha Ball married George. They never had any kids, but the Ball family, of which my grandmother is a member and descendant of, from that family, is related. So I just put this sheet together. And again, junk mail coming in. No, I'm not Roman Catholic. I was brought up a Presbyterian. I don't believe in any of that bullshit, pardon me. There's Homo sapiens, there's plant life, there's animal life, there's a cosmos, and everybody wonders how did it all begin, and how is it all going to end? Well, we know how it's going to end in terms of our own lives. You know, we die. So do animals die. Plants die. And eventually the earth is going to be swallowed up by the sun as it increases in size, which it's doing. And I'm beginning to wonder, you know, we've had these gigantic solar flares. Has this begun to emulate and enhance global warming, besides our own refuse we put up into the air in terms of carbon monoxide and all those other damn things? But anyhow, getting back to my denial religion, for some reason in my junk mail I get something from a Catholic agency soliciting funds for something, and they included a picture of George Washington praying in the woods, and the quote underneath is from Washington: "It is impossible to govern rightly without God and the Bible." Well, I wouldn't doubt that he may have said that or not, but from what I understand, George Washington was kind of a stoic individual, but did what he wanted to do and got it done very well in terms of the revolution, you know. So I've written this whole passage here to my kids and grandkids saying, I'll just read the introduction. "George Washington is a distant relative of yours," underlined. How's that? So, and then not only that, but my grandmother, Fanny Ball Underwood, married Frank Hamilton Underwood. So that raises another question. Are we related to Alexander Hamilton indirectly through my grandfather's line? I don't know. I don't have any, but somebody could sit down and
You haven't gotten into genealogy per se.
No, I haven't, and I am completely computer illiterate, and I always say, hooray, whenever they say, please leave your email address, and I put that down there, and that's my standard goodbye to electronics. And yet I know, because Cliff McCarthy and I were both labeled as kind of radicals that, oh, you know, he more so than I guess. But anyhow, they've got my number. So I know when I'm talking on the phone, I can hear interruptions, hanging, pick up lines. Somebody's living in.
Say that again?
Somebody's listening in to my phone conversations when I'm talking to people. Not all the time. And with the capabilities now, they can do that and you won't even know they're doing it. But I've heard that line being picked up a couple of times, and there's no other. I asked the person, I said, no, there's no other phone in the house, you know.
So how long is that? When did that start?
That's been going on for about 10 years or more. Yeah. So I'm in the register somewhere, and I'm sure that I've included in that book my Christmas cards back in the Bush years. And I don't know why those guys haven't all been drawn and quartered. Bush and who was his henchman? And Carl Rowe and Cheney. They're all living the life of Riley and what they cause our country to be involved with. And of course, Ronald Reagan was part of this too. And so, you know, I think all civilizations, from a couple having a family in the woods to joining other villagers to turning into towns to cities to countries, and then they start to corrupt and collapse. And that's just where the United States is. We've peaked. We're about a quarter of the way down to oblivion. China and Russia and North Korea are the potential enemies. But above and beyond those two is the whole rising fundamentalist Muslim world in the form of ISIS. And I'm afraid, as an educator, the American people are asleep at the switch. The majority. We're 300 million plus. I would say less, probably an eighth of that, are thinking, thoughtful, concerned people. The rest of the American public wants to be entertained. And what is entertainment now? It's violence. When's the last time you saw a kid playing out in the field? Outside. They're inside playing Nintendo games, and in order to win, you have to create violence. You either have to kill, destroy, or blow up. And here are adults in their 20s and 30s and 40s making millions off of these games. And then they got the audacity to insist we don't have cursive writing anymore in the schools. And we're putting in the hands in the school teaching aids in the way of pressing buttons. Now, you don't know this. Do you know how they solve the problem of catching somebody who's punching out pornography on their machine? They cut off all their fingers. So if you see anybody with stumps...
Who does that?
My mind.
Oh. Okay. Bob Borchard's doing it.
Yeah, no, he's not really doing it. But I think that somewhere along the line, something like that is going to happen. But then that doesn't solve the problem, because now these electronics are all voice operated. So you don't need your fingers. You know, you just speak into it. And automatically, it's in the airways. You realize while we're sitting here in my dining room in Guysville, Ohio, how many billions of pieces of information are floating around that we could tap in right now? Worldwide. in Russian. To Russiście Madojsia Vadalmoskova, what in Gomania. Retelling, Garata, Madalevere, Maridrion, Malan, no good one tite. A Japanese, Shinoya, Kushni, Tushwa, Osho. Or Japanese, Ding Hao, Chung, Ho, Ka, Kiki. Or German, the Schläger ausgegeben, the shooting. You know, all of those languages, not even to speak of the ones I have no idea about, are now electronically transposed. And this next war, when you think of our vital resources to defend ourselves, are primarily based on electronic communication, via satellite, via our
Drones.
weaponry, via anything. And that all gets compromised. You're dead in the sea. Do you have any idea how many North Korean submarines are offshore the Pacific coast? How many Russian submarines are in the Atlantic off our coast? How many American submarines are off the coast of Europe and in the Mediterranean, all armed with nuclear warheads right now? This is not bullshit. How do I know that? My brain surmises what I read and what I see on TV and hear on radio. So, I mean, we are living on a dream street, in a dream world, and if anything happens, metropolitan populations in north, east, and west are going to survive and move to southeast Ohio and regional backwoods areas of Tennessee and what have you to escape, supposedly, contamination. They'll bring the contamination with them, I'm afraid. But we're the refuge, not refuse. We will be refuse.
Well, we have refuse from other states.
Oh yes, it's dumped here in our
Right.
fill in the vacancies between the hills. Yeah, right outside of Nelsonville, we got a big one. It bothers me that I seem to dwell on this negativism. What is positive, Bob? What is positive? Well, what's positive is I've got 50 kids in my family. Grandchildren, great-grandkid, regular great-grandkids and grandkids, and that's just my family. And so Tish and I, as I've said before, are part of global overpopulation, but I'm just one in Guysville. And I talk to my neighbors, oh, well, I'm one of 10 kids. I'm one of 9 kids. I'm one of 6 kids, And I'm thinking, wow. And this is just here in our immediate area, but this is happening worldwide. Instead of sending millions to African countries, we ought to be supplying endless amounts of condoms.
Well, some folks in the United States have complained that our birth rate is going down.
Is that right?
They want it to go up.
They want it to go up. Well, they don't have any idea what they're talking about, I think. You can only supply so much food for so many people. And at the rate we're going, there's just not going to be a decent food supply. I'm amazed at the contamination of the oceans. Do you know that in the North Pacific, there's an area larger than the state of Texas of plastic just floating on the sea? And how deep that descends, that pile, is even probably half again. But that I heard was in the North Pacific, and I mentioned that. I said, well, that's also true in the Atlantic, the South Atlantic. And I think one of the things that we're going to see happen to alleviate some of these problems, the United States will join with Canada and Latin America, and we will be the North American economic bloc. We'll have to survive. By that time, Chile, Argentina, Colombia will get their act together, and they'll unite with Peru, and you'll have the Southern Hemisphere economic bloc. In the meantime, maybe some of those countries in Africa will get their act together, and I'm sure in the next 50 years the Middle East will unite as a strong Muslim outfit. So anyhow, those are things that I believe are going to take place in the future of my grandchildren's lives and my great-grandchildren's lives. And we haven't talked anything about asteroids.
There was something on the internet this morning about in 2015 was going to be the worst depression we've ever had, starting for 25 years.
Starting for 25 years. Well, I wouldn't be surprised. Just by listening to that report this morning and finding that short time over this summer, up and down, you know. But we've evidently have more people getting jobs again, but there's a whole bunch of people who are just out on the...
Well, I guess there's something wrong with our monetary situation.
Yeah, I would say
I don't
so.
understand all that, but I know that we just print money and it's paper.
Yeah. It's nothing. And we chop down trees to make the paper. And when you stop to think of how many trees are cut down just to make toilet paper for America, and I bless myself that I live in southeast Ohio with these woods surrounded by trees, but I'll tell you, every time I would drive, pretty much every time, into Athens to do my shopping, I would pass 2, 3, 4 logging trucks full of logs going up to Nelsonville. And you know what they do with those logs?
Cut them up.
They cut them up and they make pallets for factories to load their goods on. So a forklift can pick them up and move them onto a truck to deliver. And then what do they do with the pallets? They burn them up. Or they just discard, or people build things out of them. But a pallet is only this square for you and I, you know. But truckloads, and I've seen them coming right down 329 loaded with load. So somebody's, some guy who owns land, he's in a bind, cut the trees, I need the money. Well, how long does it take for a tree that's, say, 15 inches in diameter to reach some kind of maturity there? That's at least 20 years or more. So when you deface the land and you cut out homes for birds, owls, animals, dogs, cats, rats, and you dispose of it into the atmosphere, contaminating our air we breathe, I mean, what is this nuttiness? You know, early people realized they needed the land to live, and they used bows and arrows. And now for entertainment on TV, I can watch the West Virginia Wildlife Association. Are they talking about saving wildlife? No, they're talking about hunting. Oh, I just got that deer. God, isn't he a beauty? He holds up his head and a dead body on the ground there, you know. And now we're finding deer hunters. They're just taking the head home to get mounted. Like I've got in my living room, although that's not a deer. That's an antelope from Africa that my friend Laura Luther gave me from an old museum that was going out of business in Elgin, Illinois.
We haven't, someone said this used to be a hotel
Yeah.
where you live.
Well, what this was originally built, I think, in the early 1870s, right after the Civil War. And it didn't, it just existed on this part in the front from the east side. That was added, I think, probably in late 1890s, early 1900s. Well, in the time while people lived here, there was a trail, and then a road, and then a railroad. Indigenous salesmen making their routes would come up by horseback, and they'd rent a room and stay overnight. Then they'd rent a buckboard, and then they go north one day and come back and stay night. Then they go south one day, and then they go east, and then they go west. And when the train came, either they'd ride their horse to the next village, or when the trains came, they didn't have a horse, so they have to rent the buckboard and the horse. But they get the train. There used to be a train station right across in what is now Savannah Park.
Oh, really?
We helped to build that park back in the 1980s, I think, late in 1980s. That was a village, local people volunteering to build that. They just,
And how did you find this place?
well, I found it because the art teacher that I was replacing was moving on. And so I came down here, and I think that's the way I'm trying to think now, come to think of it. Boy, even in a short distance, we moved here in 1966. Cliff McCarthy invited me down. We both taught in Evanston, Illinois. He taught in a junior high in the north side of town, the wealthy part. I taught on the south side, which is predominantly, no, it's predominantly white, but there was quite a Afro-American population. Because I taught at Nichols Junior High, and he taught at Haven Junior High. And then he got a job at Hood College in Maryland, a women's college, for a year to replace somebody who was going on sabbatical, an old friend of his. And then the guy came back, and one of his colleagues wanted to was up for sabbatical, so Cliff stayed another year there. So I was still teaching in Athens. Well, his second year at Hood College, Cliff thought, gee, he'd heard about a job in Athens, Ohio, at the university, teaching art education and painting, or being an art teacher.
You said you were still teaching at Athens. Did you
Oh,
mean
no,
that?
I meant I was still teaching in Evanston. Sorry,
Evanston,
yeah,
okay.
sorry, excuse me, yeah, glad to correct me. Yeah, so after Cliff took his job here at Ohio U, his first year, his colleague that he joined here, it was a friend he met, it was somebody who's already here in the program. That fellow decided he wanted to get his doctorate at Ohio State. So he left, and Cliff said there's an opening. So he called me and said, would you like to come down here and join me at OU? I said, gee, that sounds great. I had 5 kids. How am I going to put 5 kids to college on my public school teacher's salary when I could go to university and they get a free education? So we moved in 1966, and that's when I started OU, and I taught there for 30 years. Only one of my kids went to college.
You could have, though.
They could have, all 5 could have had a college education. Well, John took advantage of it. He didn't go to OU though. He went to Hocking Tech And then he came back to OU to finish up and get a regular BA. And he wound up, my oldest son, working for OU and a 9-county operation to supervise health care for indigenous people, or what have you. And he'd get $1 million grants for these outfits. He's good. Peter, my second son, married a gal who was interested in herbs and herbology and plants. So Peter wound up taking over that business, and he's a very successful international salesperson of nursery plants every Saturday at the farmer's market here in Athens. And then Jean, my oldest daughter, she went to Hocking Tech and studied forestry and wound up getting married, and she lives in Lancaster with her husband and her family. And then Patty, I just didn't go, and neither did Janet. Patty, my fourth child, I should say, by the way, John, I think, is 64 going on 65. Peter's 63 going on 64. Jean is 61 going on 61. Patty is, I think, gosh, I almost think she's 60. Maybe Jean's 61 and Patty's 60. They all came pretty fast in the 1950s. And Janet's the youngest, and I think she's about 58, yeah. And Janet lives in Indiana. I was kind of dumb. I remember visiting him. He finally gave up his home in Buffalo and moved and lived in with my sister for many years. But my sister's husband just got annoyed at how slow my dad ate. And it got to be, I mean, basically, I guess that was it. And I think the fact that he was intruding on their lives or something. I mean, my dad was very careful not to upset anybody or whatever. He wasn't that kind of a guy. But my sister, Barbara, who was 3 years my junior, she realized it was either her marriage or her dad had to go somewhere else. So she put him in a nursing home across the river from New Jersey, where they were, in Pennsylvania, where he lived out the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years of his life. He wound up biting the nurses in the arm because they would wake him up, and it was 10 o'clock and he should have been up at 7, and he wanted to sleep and he didn't want to get up. And I remember I'd visit him a couple of times, and he said, well, this is a nice hotel, but I'd like to go home now. You know, well, I'd been divorced. I was living by myself. I was teaching full-time. Stupidly, I wasn't aware of the Athens County Visiting Nurses Association, where people could come in and could have looked after him, you know, and seen he was okay during the day while I was teaching. It didn't occur to me. I don't know. I said, well, gee, Dad, I can't take you home. The last time I saw him, he didn't talk to me. And I thought, well, he must be having a bad time. And he went out and he just scowled. And we went out and sat out in the greenery in between the buildings and chatted. And he didn't chat. He didn't say much of anything. He just, and I remember that angry look on his face. His son, had let him down, you know. And it was my fault. I was stupid. I'll never forget that. And absolutely that I've been so kind of ignorant of the fact that there are aid people that can come in and help out, you know. And I could have done that. My dad had a little enough money. He could have helped too on that, or my sister, you know. So it is interesting in family upbringings and what have you. Decisions you make, you don't realize, you regret sometimes, but on the other hand, you're a product of the moment at a given time, and that's what you do, you act upon it. So that's my real regret. And the nice thing about my dad and my mother, I feel very fortunate. My house with my dad and mom and my sister, and also my mother's brothers and sisters, and my dad's brothers and sisters. It was a house of laughter, a house of pain jokes, a house of good humor, and one hell of a house of a lot of love, you know. And that's why I put that book together.
That's wonderful.
It's love to share with all my friends.
Well, we haven't gotten to your book yet. Why don't you hold up the front of it so I can get it, and then maybe with the title. Why don't you hold up the title
Okay.
for this, and
Okay.
then let me get in on it a little bit. Okay, and this came out when? Yesterday?
No, I received this on the 27th of September.
Ah, okay.
It started back on about the 1st of December in 2013.
And maybe you can show us a few.
Well, I can give you a couple images. Here's one. My colleagues, Cliff McCarthy with the camera, Eric Forrest with the paintbrush, and me with the pencil.
Oh, that's
on the
you.
third floor, third floor, excuse me, of the School of Art building at Ohio University.
All right. And did you say the year?
The year that I drew this, that was in September of 1994.
Ah,
No, I didn't, they weren't standing in front of me. This is all out of my mind. All of this is out of my mind.
but you have a description on the left.
Yeah, it
About
describes it.
what's
Yeah,
on the
so you
right.
can read that if you get the
And you
book.
just happen to have all these drawings. Did you do any of them just for this book, or?
No, this book is the result of all the drawings that I've done twixt 1988 and 2014.
Well, and the
So
name.
there's 21 or 26 black and white drawings, and there's, I believe, 62 or 63 colored drawings.
And the name of that is.
Oh, yes, explaining this book to you. I am in love with Great Lake ore carriers. Being in Buffalo, they terminated in the wintertime because of the ice, the Lake Erie frozen over. And one of my dad's great thrills is on Sunday drives to go down and see those boats all tied up at the breakwall in Buffalo waiting for the spring thaw. In fact, there are even some abandoned Great Lakes ore carriers in the Buffalo River, all deteriorating. And I remember at the time thinking, boy, when I get old enough, I wonder if I could buy one of those and live on them, you know. That'd be just great. So I put wings on these boat carriers just as a symbol of the freedom of being and the fact that a boat can take you anywhere on where there's water, you know, almost. You know.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'll see if we can get another one in there. It might be a little different.
Do you have any members of your family?
I don't think so. No. I had pneumonia and I had to recover. I went to Heartworks in Athens, Ohio, part of Oblenis Hospitals, marvelous care. And Kathy partitioned, oh, what the hell's the other guy's name here? I can't remember. Tom Murray, yeah, Tom Murray. And that's Clay's Eldridge in the background on the machine. But I sat on the similar machine. There's another drawing with me sitting on one of the machines there. So this is a record of hospital stays, rehabilitation stays, boat pictures, and then I include one of my Zeppelin series in here too. I forget which, but I think, and I started to say the Germans in the Second World War used Zeppelins to bomb London.
Oh, really?
But sometimes the cloud cover was so heavy they'd have to lower a cable with a guy sitting in a seat who'd radio back up. He'd lower the guy below the clouds from the Zeppelin, and that provided hideaway for the Zeppelin from the British airplanes trying to shoot him down. And they could only, finally one guy did shoot him down. It was very difficult to planes fly that high, evidently, at that time. Well, anyhow, so this is a picture of that Zeppelin with the guy hanging below, radioing back where the things are to bomb and how to aim the ship and whatever. So that's the start of my Zeppelin series. And that all began because I, as a kid, back in the early 30s, was looking through my dad's old bound National Geographics, and they had off and on series about Zeppelins, which was a big thing in the 30s. In fact, one flew over my house. I got a picture of the Graf Zeppelin flying over my house.
Wow.
On its way to Niagara Falls to show the people the falls from the air.
That was exciting.
Yeah. And then this was something that never happened. A Zeppelin tied up at the Empire State Building. They thought they'd use the Hindenburg, which came later, to replace the Graf Zeppelin. The Graf Zeppelin finally was retired. It outlasted the Hindenburg. Flew from Germany to South America, to the United States, whatever. But they found that the idea if they could anchor right in downtown New York, people get out and they didn't have to, you know. But then they just decided that might be too dangerous. If something goes wrong, you know, were the people going to fall to the ground from that height? So they finally shifted it to Lakehurst. So I did a drawing of my imagination. I remember seeing this happen. I can find it. Oop. Must have missed it somewhere. Maybe it's this next page. Oh, hell. I did a drawing of the, yeah, here. Here's my interpretation of the Hindenburg, which I'd seen in the movies. We didn't have television in those days. The Hindenburg crashing to the ground. You know, there are people sleeping in their beds when this happened. And they walked off with the thing hit the ground. They got out of their bed and jumped, and they survived. There's quite a few survivors, but a lot of people were killed too, you know.
You're saying people on the Hindenburg were asleep?
Yeah, were evidently still in their bed. And they escaped in their pajamas.
I didn't know that.
Well, I guess that's the story I'd read and heard. And evidently, you know, the Hindenburg had been held off because of winds, you know, out in the ocean until it calmed down. So anyhow, that's pretty much my book. And it covers all kinds of different things. I don't know if there's anything else.
And where can one get a copy of it?
You can write me, and I'll tell you.
Are there any local places?
No, they're not. They're all right here. Oh, this is your copy.
Do you want there to be local places where people can go and get one?
Well, I don't know. It would be a nice way to do it, and I don't know if anybody wants to pick it up. I haven't even explored that idea.
Well, there was an article, a big article in the paper recently about a freshman that got a book published on Amazon, a great big spread.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly yours would be of interest too.
Yeah, well, I would think for local people, yeah. Well, I don't know. I'll have to think about that. I'll try to do something about it.
Which
right
gets your business, the Little Professor or the ABC?
What's ABC?
Athens Book Center.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, I think I've done more at the Athens Book Center. I used to go to the university bookstore there for a number of years when I was teaching, but yeah, I could ask them if they want to handle a couple of copies of those and see what's what.
Yeah,
that's an idea. It's a good thought,
it's
Anna.
quite a collection you have there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the name of the publisher, is that a something that has a name or a...
Well, pass it over here. See what it says here. First printing, all rights reserved. It has an ISBN number. I thought there was something in here. Oh, maybe it's on the last page. My many thanks to Rodney L. Crone III as Lone Tree Publishing for his final polish and excellent job in publishing this book.
Ah, Lone Tree, okay.
Yeah, that's in Logan, Ohio.
Ah.
But I thought he had the printer was somebody in Roswell. I'd have to dig that out. I don't know where the hell that is right now.
Lone Tree is enough. That's...
Well, yeah, I would think so, yeah.
Well, no, I came here anticipating a comedy show, and I have
Comedy show.
You have such a great sense of humor, and it's...
Well, it's gotten kind of negative, I guess, with all this concern about the future of my grandkids and the world they're going to live in. And, you know, I mean, my gosh, my dad went through the First World War. He was, in 1917, I got a picture of his regiment. They were photographed, and they were ready to go overseas, and 1/3 died of influenza.
1/3 did what?
Died of influenza. That was a big outbreak of influenza.
1/3 of the military?
Of this guy's regiment, my dad's regiment. He didn't get it.
Wow.
Very fortunate. So you don't know, you know, what the hell's going on. But anyhow, that was his history. And I can remember he still had his military hat with the broad brim and the khaki color. I think he still had his uniform. I don't remember him wearing it, but I remember that hat. And I think he wore it when he was a scout leader with the Boy Scouts in our Lafayette church there. But it's a kind of a small world. But anyhow, I'm sorry I'm not the humor guy.
Well,
But on the other hand,
we go
that's
with the flow.
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
When this was a hotel, what was the name of it?
I don't have any idea. I think it was just like any house that advertised in the local paper or somewhere. If you need a room, we have a room, you know.
Yeah.
The initial name of this town was Savannah. And
The
I don't
initial
know,
town of Guysville
was called Savannah.
Savannah.
Yeah.
Huh.
And so in one of my drawings, I've got a picture of me in a boat with a life preserver floating on the North Sea with Savannah written on it. And on the boat, I put my New Brunswick, Scotland telephone number. This is a memento, and I've got to send a copy of this. But I don't know where to my landlady when I was on sabbatical. I've had 3 sabbaticals, and one in Birmingham, England, and 2 in Scotland. And I don't know her address now because she liked to play golf, and she loved the boys, I think, putting it mildly. I think she enjoyed her sex life. And I got a phone call from her from Turkey, and she moved to Turkey outside of Ankara near a big international golf course. She wanted to know how I was doing, and excuse me, boy, I'm a busy guy in this goofy phone. Ah, golly. But anyhow, such is life. Well, I was getting down on cat food, and also I've got an inhaler prescription to be refilled. I went to use them today, and I forgot I'd ordered these last Tuesday, a week. I haven't had
So you're on oxygen,
24 hours.
and that's where it goes in there?
Yeah. And I also have, in case of I can't breathe, I can pull out one of these inhalers. And I usually use this, once or twice during the day, and usually just before I go to bed. But this is on all night long,
And you
And
get quite a bit of oxygen through there?
Well, I think, I asked the guy, I said, is this actually generated oxygen, or is this just pumping air? He said, oh, that's oxygen. Well, I also have portable oxygen tank I can carry if I go out, but it's heavy as hell. I mean,
Yeah, I'll wear it.
well, this is oxygen, this is heavy, this is oxygen, there's a tank in there. And I've got 4 spare tanks over here. So I can go somewhere, but it is such a pain in the ass carrying that and moving around with it that I usually don't use it unless I feel, boy, I'm having a hard time breathing, so maybe I just better take in some oxygen, so.
Well, we used to enjoy you at the poetry readings.
Well, I feel badly I can't get to those because, did I give you a copy of my poem about Snowflake with the cat sitting on my head?
With the cats?
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
Well, when I
How
read my
many cats do you have?
Well, I have an inside cat named Snowflake.
Oh, okay.
And then I had a pregnant mama cat who gave birth to 4 kits. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the back porch. And so they've grown up. And then she disappeared. And then next time I saw her, she was pregnant again. So she'd had another litter of cats somewhere else. Oh, I forgot to turn this off. And then I have a black cat that comes around. He's a very affectionate guy, but he only comes around at night. So he belongs to somebody. So I had to put out 3 pans of cat food at night, 2 in the morning because he's not there. And I'm getting tired of that. I'm getting...